Welcome again to the Booktopia podcast. I'm Ben Hunter, the fiction category manager at Booktopia, and this is a conversation that I've been really excited to have for a long time. I'm reaching out over Skype to speak with Victoria Hannan, whose book Kokomo was the recipient of the VPLA for Unpublished Manuscript. It's a fantastic new literary novel, which I'm really excited to finally see published. Victoria, how are you going today?
I'm all right, thank you.
You're
in lockdown in Melbourne.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're in Melbourne, you're in lockdown.
Yeah.
Are you doing jigsaw puzzles and
I'm
staring at the wall?
I'm playing with my cat and watching movies and spending a lot of time in my vegetable garden.
Good.
Yeah, I feel lucky. I moved into this house just before the first lockdown happened, and we have a beautiful garden, so I feel very, very lucky.
It's your lockdown home.
It is.
There's been a real great deal of excitement for this novel for some time. As I said, you won the VPLA last year, which is a really highly sought after prize that's seen the publication of some really successful novels and some really stellar writing careers that are now flourishing off the back of it. And your publisher is making a massive song and dance about this debut, and you've had some stellar early reviews. How does it finally feel to have it go out into the public in this time of isolation?
It sort of feels like an out-of-body experience in a way, because it's like I'm having a lot of conversations with my computer and with my phone, like down the phone, but I don't get to see people, and I don't know when I'm even going to be able to see the book in the shops. But I think there's something about lockdown which has kind of made the community sort of really come together, and everybody is so supportive and has been so lovely, that maybe I just want this to be the way it is from now on, because everyone's so focused and just wants everyone to do well.
Yeah, it's a real silver lining, isn't it?
Yeah. And I mean, I guess the other thing is, like, I'm so happy that it's happening just anyway. This has been something that I've wanted to do for so long, and it does feel like kind of the journey from starting to write the book over 3 years ago now, to winning the VPLA and now to it being published. It feels like it's been a very long time. So I'm so happy that it hasn't been like the Olympics and been cancelled, and it's actually happening. So yeah, that's pretty great.
How would you briefly describe the novel for readers who haven't heard of Kokomo yet?
I would say I have kind of been working on an elevator pitch, because I think, like all writers, I get asked this all the time. It's the story of a woman named Mina. She's in her early 30s and she's living in London. She's working in advertising. One day she gets a phone call from her best friend back in Melbourne telling her that her mum has just left the house for the first time in 12 years. So Mina jumps on a plane to come back to Melbourne to find out why. When she gets here, she kind of can't get any straight answers out of her mother, Elaine, and she's being very closed off, and so she sort of has to do a lot of work and have a lot of like strange experiences reconnecting with old friends, and then trying to kind of get to the bottom of this mystery with her mother. So it's really the story of kind of women across 2 generations just trying to understand their place in the world.
That's very well put.
Thanks.
I read this book months ago now, but it still ricochets around in my brain. I see Mina, your hero, as this millennial Australian trying to make her way through adulthood, with this uncomfortable relationship with the mother, but also with her friends and with herself. And while the circumstance with the mother is unique, I still see a great deal of parallel with my life and the lives of people around me. And I don't even think that circumstance of the mother character is even that unique. I'm sure there's far more troubled relationships that are all around us. And I think as young, latte slippers, we kind of shrink away from those uncomfortable relationships and those really hard conversations. Was this like a really personal project for you?
It was in some ways. So I feel like like Mina, I worked in and lived and worked in the UK for a long time. I was there for almost 10 years. And then I had to come home and kind of reconnect with people in my life who maybe I hadn't seen for a long time or hadn't had a great relationship with for a while. And there is very much that feeling when you come back, even though I've lived in Australia for most of my life. You come back here and you do feel a bit like an alien, and you're just trying to kind of work people and things out and just remember which side of the escalator you have to walk on. Just little and big things where you're just kind of trying to reacquaint yourself with your old life, I suppose. So in that way, it was very personal experience and kind of very like emotionally resonant with my real life. And also, I guess, with the kind of family part of it as well. I think for anybody who lives overseas for a long time, and has that freedom of movement, you sort of always have that thought in the back of your head. It's like, what's that phone call or what's that emergency that's going to get me on the plane home? And for me, it wasn't an emergency so much as my dad was ill, and I kind of decided to come home while I could still have some good time with him. So I kind of made that decision in advance of the emergency phone call coming. But I think there's still that element of kind of grieving that life that I had in London, that Mina also goes through. But she's also kind of grieving the life that she had in Melbourne too. So it's kind of this real, I guess, whirlpool of emotions for her.
Yeah, it certainly is.
Yeah, and I guess just I really wanted to write something as well that was kind of a bit of a love letter to friendship. And I feel like so many of the characters in this book, it's kind of trying to understand what sort of romantic love means in their lives, but sort of soon discovering that their friendships are just as, if not more, valuable and important to them.
Yes, I remember really enjoying that element. And I remember this delicious blend you concoct of comedy and blankness and darkness in your novel. And there's a balance of a really coarse honesty about people and how they are, combined with the real gentleness with which you handle the characters, which is something you don't often read, or at least in my experience, you don't often read in the work of young writers. It's maybe one of the things that distinguishes Sally Rooney, for example. Who do you read? Where do you get inspiration?
I mean, I have read all the Sally Rooneys, and I do think that she's quite remarkable in the way that she kind of handles the kind of honest relationship between people. But I also I love Maggie Nelson. I've been like rereading some of the Maggie Nelsons lately, and I love Deborah Levy. I think Cost of Living is quite an extraordinary piece of work, and I've read it kind of twice or three times a year since it first came out. What else have I been reading? When I was writing Kokomo, I read a book called The Animators by Kayla Ray.
Oh, yeah.
Read that? Yep. There was something about the kind of relationship between the two main characters in that book, and I've forgotten their names now, but their friendship was so honest and so complex and so fraught, and it was a real roller coaster ride. And there was so much energy between them, and also energy and pace in that book, that I feel like that was a kind of a big influence on me as well.
Yeah. I'm so thrilled you brought that up. I've forgotten about that novel. There's that. She really beautifully captures the creative lifestyle.
Absolutely. I feel like that
friendships that sort of,
so, yeah, sadly underread. I just didn't hear enough people talking about it.
Oh, good. I'm glad we've given it a boost on the podcast. Yeah, I'll put a link to it in the show notes.
Great.
One area, speaking of creativity, one area that you explore in this novel with respect to the life that Mina leaves behind in London is the way women are exploited, particularly in the creative industries. And there's a devastating blow that she receives at one point in this novel. And I remember reading those pages while I was on a train in Sydney, and I was sitting pretty much alone in this carriage, just as it was sinking in, and there was a guy on the other side of the room, on the other side of the carriage, and he was just sort of sprawling across 6 seats somehow, and he got his phone speaker out and started playing that sad Green Day song.
Oh God.
Something unpredictable.
Oh, yeah. I'm so sorry that happened to you.
Yeah, well, it just punctuated the moment. Like, he just suddenly represented the entire patriarchy, and I've never wished worse things to happen to another human being. But apart from being angry at random dudes on the train, what can we do to combat the culture of shitness, particularly in the creative industries?
Oh, that's such a good question. I wish I had an answer of how to fix it. In my experience, it's just like having greater representation of like diversity of not just gender, but also race. There's just still, even in most agencies that I've worked at, it's still so dominated by white men. And I guess while those people are still in power, it's hard to shift things. But I feel like, just got to keep using our voices. And I mean, I guess I did it in novel form, but also in jobs I've had before. I've always been the one putting my hand up to be like, hey, this isn't right. Hey, we need a voice in this. Hey, but it does get to the point where they're like, oh, here she goes again. I'm that person. And so it's exhausting. So we just need people who have the power and the voices, I suppose, to just keep talking and keep putting their hand up when they think things aren't right.
Absolutely, especially if you are that if you are that white guy in the creative industries, and opportunity does come to you on a silver platter, maybe you should ask the question: Is the silver platter going around, or is it just coming to you? And why is it just coming to you?
Yeah, do I deserve this silver platter?
Yes. Yeah, totally. There's nothing wrong with the silver platter, but it needs to be shared.
Maybe we should break it up into a bunch of smaller silver plates so that everyone can have a piece.
Everyone gets a shard.
Yeah.
Without wanting to spoil what goes on in the novel, there are episodes where you do a flashback to the 1980s, and you get generational perspectives. As the author, was it enjoyable for you to step back and write that different time frame, or do you prefer to stay in the present?
One thing I learned while I was writing this is that I don't really enjoy research. So in some ways it was nice to kind of go back in the characters' lives and sort of understand a bit more about their motivations and why they behave the way they behave. But when it came to like getting things right about what a certain street would look like, I found that like quite excruciating. So in some ways I prefer the present, but maybe I just need, whenever I do a flashback in the future, I just need to like make it in just like an empty room or something, so I don't have to worry about historical inaccuracies.
Yes. Oh, well, that's what editors can help with.
Yeah, that's true. I did actually get my mum to do a bit of research for me at one point because she loves that. And so I was like, hey, Mum, can you just find a picture of what this certain street looked like in 1980? And she was very into that.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
it's a family affair.
Family affair.
In your bio, it describes you as a writer, photographer, and creative director. What do you get up to in the way of photography and creative directing?
So photography, I used to do quite a lot more than I do now, I guess, because the writing has sort of taken over a bit. But I am I would describe myself as a vernacular photographer. I shoot on film only with just all natural light. In the past, I've kind of shot for some magazines. So when I was living in the UK, I did some stuff for Glamour. and a food magazine called Lucky Peach.
I've read that.
It's a great magazine. So that was just an absolute honour to be asked to do. And I had a blog that was quite popular for a while back in the olden days when people had blogs. And so that was kind of the photography stuff. Now I exhibit every so often. Like I had my first kind of solo show a year or two ago. And now it's kind of a bit more just for fun. But I guess the other side of things is like how I actually make money is that I still do a bit of work in advertising and marketing in the kind of digital space here and there. So a bit more on a freelance basis now. But I'm still, unfortunately for me, maybe I shouldn't say that, entrenched in the advertising world.
It's I'm sure there were worse places to be entrenched.
Yeah.
Are you perhaps responsible for the beautiful photograph on the jacket of Kokomo?
I'm not. I tried. Every so often with my publisher, I would just send him a couple of pictures to be like, what about this one? I know the photographer. I can get it for you very cheap. And he was like, no, stop now.
Yeah, right.
Maybe book 2. I'll be able to get my own picture on the front.
The bio also describes artisan residence programs in Brazil, Tasmania, and Iceland.
Yeah.
Have you decided which continent or latitude is most suitable for creating wonderful literary fiction now? You've sampled them all?
I love them all. It was too hard to choose. I did one in America last year as well.
Wow.
I like to travel, and so if I can do a residency while I'm there, I can somehow justify taking all of these holidays. But they're all sort of, I think they influenced the book in all of like quite odd and different ways. And in each one, I don't know, something about residencies that kind of make people a little bit crazy. I guess you're all locked up in a house together in a foreign country and all just trying to do work together. And I don't know, there's always some interesting personalities and strange things that take place. So I definitely feel like some of maybe particularly the Iceland one, kind of impacted certain parts of the book for sure.
It's really cool. How are you responding to all the early praise, and have you shared the novel around with your close family and loved ones?
So I held off sharing the novel with my parents for quite some time, and anyone who reads the first chapter will understand why. I was pretty nervous about that. And even when I was writing it, I was like, I'm going to try and make this quite weird in certain places, but it's okay. No one's ever going to read it. Like mum and dad are never going to see it. And then obviously it's going to be in shops pretty soon. And my mum has convinced her book club to do it as their book club pick. So I was like, okay, I have to bite the bullet and send it to them. And so my mum has read it, and she said, I wasn't offended in any way. So that's good. That's the best possible feedback, I think.
Yeah.
But in terms of praise, I don't know, it still sort of doesn't feel real. And I still sort of suspect that maybe my publisher is just slipping people a check here and there to say nice things.
I assure you, I've received no such check, and I love
okay,
it.
Maybe it's in the mail. Keep checking.
What are you going to work on next?
So I have just actually finished a second draft of my second novel. I don't want to give too much away, but it is also about grief in many ways, but quite a different story, and it's told from 5 people's point of view. And hopefully there'll be some lightness with the dark, just like in Kokomo too. I don't want it to be a sad novel, even though it is about death and grief. So hopefully some good jokes in there too. Yeah.
And how are you staying sane in the time of Corona? How are you handling it?
I'm not sure that I am staying sane.
Yeah.
But, I got a cat. That was the kind of best thing that I did. He's just probably the best decision I've ever made. He's very cute and silly. So that's been nice. And I'm trying to exercise every day and get really ripped.
Oh, cool.
yeah, so ask me again in a couple of months and maybe I'll be able to send you a picture of my six-pack or something.
That sounds really exciting.
Yeah, but just those two things.
Victoria, thank you so much for chatting today and being generous with your time and for writing such a wonderful novel.
Thank you so much. I'm such a fan of the podcast, so it was so nice to be invited to talk to you.
We will have you back in a heartbeat. Kokomo is published by Hachette and it is available from booktopia.com.au, along with all the other wonderful novels we mentioned earlier. We'll put a link in the show notes, as mentioned. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Booktopia podcast channel. Don't forget, you can subscribe to us on SoundCloud and iTunes for free and get access to hundreds of author discussions, book analysis pieces and more. Or, if your eyes need a workout, head to Booktopia TV on YouTube. Don't forget, for all books featured in this podcast and for access to a whole bunch of other fun content on our blog, head to Booktopia, Australia's local bookstore, at booktopia.com.au.